Hello, everyone. We're gonna give it a couple of minutes and let everyone jump on. Then we'll get going in like a minute or two. All right, we're gonna get rolling here. Thank you, everyone, for attending the very first session of the Outdoor Skilled Series. My name is Brett Kozlowski. I'm a senior technical trainer for Snap One. Also joined by a special guest, Matt Camp. Matt, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, sure. Appreciate it, Brett. Thanks. Here to help and support in any way I can. Nice to meet everybody. My name is Matt Camp, based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I lead our entertainment business unit here at Snap One. So all of our basically all the audio and video products and experiences, whether it's speakers, multi-room audio, electronics, video distribution, outdoor TVs, all that, you name it. So happy to be here. Appreciate the introduction, Brett, and I'll be helping to assist answer questions in the background and can help as needed.
Excellent. Well, thank you a lot, Matt. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, please throw it in the Q&A and we'll make sure we address them by the end of this. And of course, you can always visit your local Snap One partner store to see some of the amazing outdoor products that we have to offer. So outdoor audio has some challenges. Okay. We deal with natural elements, the sun, wind, rain, temperature, extremes. Okay. Usually they're going to be typically larger spaces. You're not dealing with a little room in your house. Okay. There's little to no room gain or boundary effects. So there's no walls that sound's really going to bounce off of. You got long wire runs. There's, of course, the ambient noise challenge, as well as trying to keep your neighbors happy. So to start this process off, and this is going to be a more basic generalization of designing outdoor audio. First thing is always going to be meet your clients, right? What's their overall objective for their outdoor space? Do they want just background music, or do they want to jam out like a concert or something like that? You know, what areas do they want to cover? Is it just one, or is it potentially maybe many areas? Okay. Of course, consideration is always how large each space is. Okay. Then you've got the consideration as well of, do they want different content playing in different areas if you're covering both? Okay. That's again another question you want to go and ask your customer. Okay. The other thing is aesthetics. How does things need to look in the environment? Do they need to blend? Do they just want something mounted? Okay. Now we also have the option of incorporating lighting as well. Next week, we're going to dive deep into Radiance, that product line that does include lighting. So we're not going to be addressing too much of it today. The other thing is who needs to access this system? Is it just one person, multiple people? And then, of course, where's the equipment going to get stored? Is it going to go in an equipment closet somewhere? Okay. And then lastly, and I think we all know this, is what kind of budget are you looking at? All right. So good news is after you establish your customer's goals for the outdoor system, now it's going to be time to create a plan. So good news is there are a variety of solutions now to help you design your project. Episode, Triad, are great solutions. And you should be aware of all your potential options as well as some of the benefits these options have and potentially some downsides to them as well. Okay, some thing that I think most of us actually forget about is we do have architectural all-weather speakers, okay, whether it be in wall or in ceiling, and they're weather resistant and available in multiple sizes and configurations. So some of their benefits is they're great for background music. Their grills can be painted to match decor, and they're designed to disappear into the ceilings and walls. Some of the downsides may not fit in a shallow mounting space, so you got to make sure you have depth. Uh, In-wall options are relatively limited, and you really have limited high impedance options as well. Then, of course, you also got to think about lifespan, especially in, let's say, high salt environments, okay? So the coastal areas. Another great solution for outdoor products is going to be our surface mount. Okay, they're mounted to a solid surface like a wall or a fence or under an eave. And what's great is you can actually beam audio directly to a specific area. Again, great for background music. Again, they can be aimed at a specific location. And they are usually available in 70-volt, 100-volt, and or low impedance. So what's great is they're very secure mounting for anti-theft. So great solution for maybe like a restaurant that has an outdoor eating area where you can mount that under like a beam or something like that. So some of the downsides, obviously, they're not going to be the best choice for mounting on the ground typically. Okay. And they still look like a speaker. So realistically, you're not going to be camouflaging these into your environment. All right, next is rock speakers. So these are fiberglass molded speakers that look like rocks. And what's great is they can be placed around maybe like something like a garden or something like that. Again, great for background music, can be aimed at specific locations if that's what you need. And they are usually available in 70-volt, 100-volt, or low impedance. What's great is there are secure mounting options available for these as well, and they're available in multiple finishes. Some of the potential downsides is they're not necessarily going to go and blend into every specific environment. And sometimes you may need to go and add a subwoofer for a fuller sound. All right, next one is our landscape speakers. Uh, Landscape speakers were really first designed to mimic the look of commercial landscape lighting and can provide great sound with great scalability. Okay, with satellite speakers that have flexible mounting and can include either a burial or a hardscape subwoofer as well. So some of their benefits, they fill large areas with sound really effectively. And really, like I said, the scalability, your ability to go and expand that system and cover large spaces. And it's going to blend in with the traditional landscape lighting. So very appealing to the eye. Some of the what I'll call downsides again, limited security options, okay, and obviously a burial subwoofer, even though it looks attractive when installed, can be labor intensive if you're going to do it yourself. Probably want to maybe hire someone to do that one. All right, last one is Bullard speakers. Like I said, if you're really interested in the Radiance line, join us next week where we'll be doing a really deep dive on it and showing the whole design. But I definitely have to mention it. Uh, they're based on like the light aesthetics and traditionally used to create like a visual boundary essentially along the pathway. They can contain audio, lighting, combination of both. Okay. Some of the benefits is it radiates sound 360 degrees. Okay, so it helps fill up that whole listening space. And then, of course, lighting can be used for whether it be aesthetics and or safety. Now, unfortunately, while the 360-degree sound can be great for some applications, it might not be suitable for application where aiming is kind of required. All right, just going to take a quick pause here. We got a couple of questions, Matt. I think you're kind of answering them.
Yep,
Any of them that
trying to
you,
get through them in the chat as we can.
yeah. And anything that you want to address for everyone?
Yeah, I think one of the, well, I can kind of go through them here a little bit. One of the questions was on wiring and whether or not it's okay to use normal speaker wire and a Schedule 40 pipe. I would say, while yes, it's probably doable, it's always recommended to use burial wire. You're never going to fully prevent against moisture in a ground unless the pipes are fully sealed all
Yeah.
the way up until out of the ground. And so it's always recommended to use burial wire, even in
And
Schedule
I was going
40.
to actually get to that as well.
Oh, fantastic.
The wiring
Yeah,
aspect of it.
Schedule 40 is super helpful for future proofing. If you want to run additional wires, you can snake the wire through the Schedule 40. There was a question on ceiling speakers having adjustable tweeters. Depending on the model, the Signature 3 series has a pivoting or rotating tweeter. The Core series all weathers do not. There was a question on wiring connections. So obviously different speakers have different wiring methodologies.
Yeah.
Our landscape speakers have a pigtail, so you would just wire the system up in parallel using included silicon-filled wire nuts. All-weather surface mount speakers have a gold-plated push terminal on the back, and so you could again, take a pair of speakers, twist them together, and put them into the push terminals. So let's see what else here.
Yeah, great questions, everyone.
Angle. Yeah, I think the question from Scott here on the best position for angling of the speakers, I would agree. Usually aiming it at what would be kind of typical listening levels, whether or not it's sitting or standing. Kind of pick the average of where most people sit. There's a pretty wide dispersion, I believe, on the landscape speakers. It's 110 degrees.
110.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you
110
get
on the
pretty,
landscape.
yep. So you get pretty good dispersion there, and so you don't have to be too particular about where they're pointed, but generally speaking, you kind of want to project the sound into the area that you're looking to fill. Do you recommend painting the LS6? I wouldn't say it's recommended or advised against necessarily. I think it's preference as to whether or not you want to paint it. I would say if you're going to do that, the biggest thing just to make sure is that, and this goes for painting any product with a grill, is you just want to make sure that the paint is not filling the holes in the grill, and make
Yep.
sure obviously you're using suitable paint for outdoor applications and environments. So I'll let you keep going. I'll keep hammering away at some of these questions here.
Excellent. I'm going to stop a couple of times and we'll interject if anything good comes up.
Yep.
Excellent. So obviously we're dealing with outdoors. Again, this was more, I think, interesting for me just to see what the IP ratings actually stood for. So it actually has to do with how it's protected against either dust and or water. So that first number is going to be its dust protection rating. Okay. You can look this up as well. This shows all the different ratings. And then your second number is going to be the rating for how it protects against water. Okay. So again, we're in an outdoor environment. So you want to make sure that it has some level of IP rating, no matter what outdoor product that you're going to be using. All right, so let's talk. Here we go. All right, what do we do? High impedance, low impedance. Is there advantages? Well, typically your low impedance systems, so your 8 and 4 ohm speakers, are typically going to be your smaller systems. I would say usually less than 4 speakers. What's great about high impedance is you can do a ton of speakers. I mean, again, up to about 100. We'll talk about amp ratings as well in a second here. But you could do a lot of speakers, which is great because you can cover a huge area. All right, another consideration when you're trying to make your choices of speakers is, and again, we have a chart available, definitely think of the distance from your speakers. So usually low impedance, you want to keep your wire runs less than 300 feet. What's great with high impedance systems is we could do really, really long runs, okay, up to thousands of feet depending on the wire gauge that you use. So another thing to consider is how is volume actually controlled for high impedance versus low impedance. So for low impedance, it's really going to be controlled by the amplifier, usually a set it and forget it kind of thing. And then you have your source that you can attenuate the volume. What's great about high impedance is you can actually set it at the speaker itself, and then it could be controlled by the amplifier or the source. So there's another layer of control for your volume. So if you've got areas where you want it a little bit louder than others, you set the tap at the bottom and kind of adjust per each area. All right, this one, I'm not sure if sound quality. Yes, low impedance probably overall is the better choice from at least a sound quality perspective. But realistically, I think the high impedance stuff that is out there now has really improved over the years, and you still get a absolutely great sound out of it.
Hey Brett, real quickly, I think just
Yes.
to add to your comment around sound quality, oftentimes sound quality is associated with output volume. And one of the things that I think is really important to understand in landscape audio is that to create the environment that you're looking for from a performance perspective with volume doesn't have to equal each speaker itself playing louder. Oftentimes in landscape audio, more is more. and so
I uh, I
and
always
so
use the analogy, Matt, of I'm sure everyone here has been to a restaurant where the sound is blowing you out of the water, and that's the one that doesn't have enough speakers
yep.
where they can
Yeah.
keep it low and even and consistent.
Yeah. And so when you're comparing, one speaker in 8 ohm versus one speaker in 70 volt, I would say 10 times out of 10, if you were to compare those two side by side, you would choose the 8 ohm speaker.
Yeah.
I would say if you are choosing 4 speakers in 8 ohm versus 4 speakers in 70 volt, again, I would say you're probably better off going with, the challenges associated with trying to wire up 4 speakers. If you have the option of doing 4 speakers in 8 ohm, or I don't know, pick a number, 15 or 20 speakers in 70 volt, it's going to sound significantly better to have a more encompassing and encapsulating sound with 15 or 20 70 volt speakers than 4 speakers in 8 ohm. So I think when people ask like which sounds better, uh, a properly done system in 70 volt will sound better than a traditional, 8 ohm system with fewer speakers.
Yeah, no, very, very well put. And that's what I was trying to kind of convey, that that's almost like a misconception. Excellent. All right, so let's talk about low impedance wiring. Every one of you knows the old drill, right? You're wiring your speakers, typically home run right to your amplifier. All right, so let's say we have a low impedance amplifier. Typical rating is usually stable down to 4 ohms, so it can handle 8 or 4 ohm loads. And then you're going to get 8 ohms on each channel. Okay, of course, there's other ways to go and add more speakers. We could do parallel wiring as well as series wiring. I'm not going to make you guys do math, but if you kind of can see these two equations here, parallel wiring is going to actually lower the impedance that your amplifier sees, whereas series wiring is going to increase that impedance that that amplifier sees. And obviously, we want to keep within that range of what the amplifier wants to see. I want to say typical is usually 4 to 16 ohms. Okay. Yeah, you could get a little cute and clever and do a combination of parallel and series wiring to make that uh, the amplifier see what it wants to see. Uh, but again, that creates a little more complexity. So let's say I did want to have 4 speakers, okay, and they're 8 ohm speakers, and I want to wire a set in parallel within each other. You just got to understand that your amplifier is going to see a 4 ohm load, which, like I said, most amplifiers are typically stable to 4 ohms, so you'd be okay. Hence, kind of that 4 number of our low impedance speakers. So the beauty of high impedance wiring is we can actually go and run one wire, wire them all up in parallel, okay, all back to a location. So obviously the complexity of wiring is a lot easier. You're not home running everything. You could kind of, let's call it daisy chain from one to the next. All right, so we can actually put multiple speakers all on each channel of a 70 volt or 100 volt high impedance amplifier. So when we're calculating amplifier load, it's a little bit different for high impedance. So let's say we have a 500 watt amplifier. Most people will typically tell you you want about 15 to 20% headroom. So which means you want to cap out right around 400, maybe 420 watts. Again, what's great with the high impedance speakers is you'll notice there's taps at the bottom of the speakers, and we can actually go and set the dial for how many watts that each speaker will actually require. Okay, so I just threw out some numbers. Let's say we've got 3 speakers tapped out at 30 watts, and then we've got 2 speakers tapped out at 60 watts. We want an area that needs a little bit more gain. That gives us 210 watts. We take our 400 watts, subtract the 210, plenty of headroom, and we could probably add more speakers if the customer wanted to. All right, again, now we have our hybrid system wiring. This is kind of the best of both worlds, where we actually have 70 or 100 volt, and we can wire them in daisy chain, just like I showed you before. And then we have a 8 ohm subwoofer that wires back as well. Okay. And like I said, this is a hybrid configuration. So you're running realistically 70 volts on one channel of a amplifier, and then you're running 8 ohms on the other channel. So you get the great low end from subwoofers. And again, add a second subwoofer if you want, if the area is large enough, because they're 8 ohm subwoofers. Again, the amp is 4 ohm capable, so you could actually daisy chain 2 subwoofers pretty safely. And I did say I would get to this, and this is speaker wire. So, as Matt already said, definitely want to use direct burial. I know people that even if it's in conduit, you're probably better off doing that. Obviously, if you're doing it in walls, you want CL2 rated, but definitely keep in mind about your wire lengths and the gauge of wire that should be used, because there is something called loss over the cable run, and you want to make sure that you don't kind of exceed what we recommend. Okay, so this is kind of highlighted the this is your good range kind of deal, whether you're using 8 ohm speakers, and you could see by this chart as well. Max you could get is like 604 feet, but that's 50% loss, and that's a 14 gauge wire. Okay, whereas your 70-volt speaker system, you're going to be able to do a lot longer runs, as well as not use necessarily as high of a gauge if you didn't have to. All right, this is a time we could go and take questions.
Yeah, I think we got most of them covered that were answered here. I think one thing potentially uh potentially it's already understood, but I think going back to one of the comments, Brett, you were talking about with tap settings,
Yep.
just so everybody's aware that the purpose of the tap setting is so when you're doing 70-volt systems, all of your volume control is done in a single zone. And so you don't have independent volume control by speaker. What the tap setting allows you to do is, depending on where you have to place the speaker relative to the listening area. So let's just say you've got, a fire pit area that forces you to push that speaker further away from the listening area than other speakers. You can actually increase the tap setting on that one, so the relative volume of that speaker is higher compared to others. And so the goal is that you're trying to create an even listening level no matter where you are in the system at the listening point. And so you're adjusting the levels of each individual speaker. So I just wanted to point out that's kind of the
Yeah,
intention
yeah.
behind the tap settings. A lot of
And if you
times
guys want to
people
look that up, inverse square law is what it's called, basically. So it's 4 times less for doubling your distance. Isn't that correct?
yeah, so typically yes, I
Yeah,
believe it is.
like that's the general rule of thumb.
Yeah. There's a question here. Is it safe to say that high impedance speakers would be used for larger systems, or is it possible that a 4-ohm, 8-ohm system could be used too? So yes, I mean it is definitely possible to use 8-ohm speakers in outdoor environments. As Brett was saying, the challenge there is that you can't daisy chain oftentimes more than two 8-ohm speakers off of a single channel, because it'll drop the impedance too low for the amplifier, and then the amplifier will go into a protection state. But you could do multiple zones off of an 8-ohm amplifier to multiple pairs of speakers. The problem is to do that in scale, you're having to home run every wire back to the amplifier, which creates more cost. I think somebody put in there, which is you're saving costs when you're doing 70-volt as well. So is it possible?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Is it advised? I think it's a preference as to whether or not you want the simplicity of wiring, or potentially the benefits of getting each individual speaker to play with better performance and louder.
Yeah, I always thought the number 4 number was kind of that sweet spot for 8 ohm.
Next question, is the 360 series available now? I believe that question is in reference to the Radiance system that is available now. We've been selling that for coming up on a year now with great success. So gotten lots of really positive feedback on the flexibility and scalability of that system to incorporate both audio and lighting in a single 2-conductor system. And as Brett was suggesting, the benefits there is you can wire the radiant system in the exact same way that you do any other traditional landscape, and it gives you the lighting ability off of the same two conductor wire. So lots of really good solution problem solving with that system.
Yeah.
So
And
yes,
and
that
if
is
you want to
available
deep
now.
dive on that, next week it's going to be all radiance. I kind of left that off my plate because it's kind of its own it's its own thing.
Yeah,
So,
look forward to that one. Next question here is, how many zones can you run on the hybrid amp? So the hybrid amp is intended to be a single zone system. You can actually use it as a two zone system where it has the capability of doing 70 volt on one channel or two channels, 8 ohm on either channel, or a combination of 70 volt and 8 ohm, which is why we call it that hybrid model. And so what its primary application and purposes is to run a single zone. You pair the zone output control so that when you adjust the volume of one channel, it adjusts the other. You can set the offsets and stuff like that. So it's for landscape applications, it's intended to be a single zone. It is a two-channel amplifier. So if you wanted to do two separate 70 volt systems, you could do two 70 volt zones from it. Not sure what's meant here, Brett. Apologize if I missed the name of the first class of speakers you were
oh,
discussing.
architectural.
Okay.
Again, you would have to have some sort of covering overhead and a place to do it. I always think people sometimes forget about them, that there are solutions out there for that type of application.
I see from Scott, please explain to people there are lots of companies selling aluminum clad with copper dipped. Don't
Oh,
learn the hard
I
way.
think I know what he's talking about, Matt. They used to use this back in the day. It's you put it on the copper of the wire before you fasten it into a speaker, and it helps just seal it
Ah,
from rust and stuff.
yeah, got it. Let's see here. Important to remember that if you parallel a second sub, your impedance drops to 4 ohms, increasing the wire gauge requirement depending on distance. Yes. So
Yes.
every time you add another speaker or subwoofer in parallel, you're halving the impedance. And so, it's also important to remember that speakers are not constant impedance devices. They change. The impedance of the speaker changes depending on the type of content, the volume of the content. And so you'll often see specifications around what's referred to as nominal impedance. And so even though sometimes a speaker is referred to an 8 ohm speaker, its nominal impedance may be 6 ohms, for example. And so our hybrid amplifiers are stable down to 2 ohms. And so we have tested them so that you can actually put 3 subwoofers in parallel. But again, depending on, to the comment and the point here, the wire gauge will affect the impedance that the amplifier sees, the content, the volume, all of that. So great point. Let's see here. What if you are in a Sonos ecosystem and want to use a Sonos amp? It has a left and right output. Since it's outdoor and want an even listening, how do you connect the speakers for a typical backyard with 2 to 4 speakers? Yeah, so I think in this case, Paul, you would use the Sonos amp. You'd have to use it with our 8 ohm speakers, and you'd be limited to like you're suggesting, one speaker per output, or potentially paralleling 2 speakers per output and getting 4. An alternative to this is if you want to stay in the Sonos ecosystem, you could use a Sonos port as a source device going into a hybrid amplifier, and then you've kind of got the best of both worlds where you're doing a traditional landscape outdoor audio system, but your source stays within the Sonos ecosystem. And that is, again, one of the benefits of our electronic solution. Our hybrid amplifier has, it's got a 12 volt trigger, it's got audio sense, it's got IP control. And so you can set it for the amplifier controlling inside of a control system, or set it to be more of a dumb amp and using an external source as your source content. So definitely options there to stay inside the Sonos ecosystem. So 70 volt comes out as mono, not stereo. So 70 volt itself isn't what dictates whether or not it's mono or stereo. The output of the amplifier is what dictates whether or not it's mono or stereo. So in theory, you could do two channels out of a hybrid amplifier with both 70 volt and have one channel run as the left and the other channel run as the right and get stereo sound outdoors. That's not advised because of the large distances and spaces typically between speakers. You don't want to get this kind of echo or wah-wah effect. And so oftentimes, and this is the case in all of our preset DSPs, you'll set the output to mono summing so that the stereo input gets summed and then it's a mono output for each channel. And so again, the mono versus stereo is actually set at the output of the amplifier and is kind of independent from whether it's 70 volt or 8 ohm. You could do 70 volt in stereo. It's not recommended.
These are all great questions.
They're fantastic questions. Is there a sound advantage? So yeah, I think we covered this one a little bit.
Yeah.
But again, an 8 ohm single speaker versus a 70 volt single speaker, yes, you will absolutely hear a performance benefit out of an 8 ohm speaker. The difference is that you can't scale an 8 ohm speaker. And so with 70 volt, almost always I would take the option of being able to create a system with scale and 70 volt over fewer 8 ohm speakers. The bollards question mark. Yes, the bollards. I don't know what that.
I'm gonna guess that it's because I didn't really cover it too much because our line of bollard speakers we're covering next week. Like I said, they're unique. And I kind of deserve to be put on its own webinar.
Yeah, and then the one before rock speakers, I think you caught that one on the architectural. Counterfeit cables caught on. Yeah. So I think you covered that one on the wiring. Let's see, with the no minimum with flute meter, the sublocation, no amp or speaker attached. Test for attention ambient speakers. I think that's a statement, not a question. Please reframe it if I'm misunderstanding that. Applications where 6-inch satellites versus 4-inch satellites would be recommended. You want to take this one, Brett?
Well, I think you tell me if I'm wrong. For me, it's more of a sound performance thing, right? You want a better sound quality. This 6 inches definitely sound a little bit better to me, more fuller. And you can even jump up to the 8-inch ones and almost pull off, not even running a sub potentially.
Yeah, I agree. I would say there's kind of a triangulation of decisions here around performance, cost, and aesthetics. And so depending on, where somebody falls on that spectrum of if they don't care about aesthetics and price point, then go bigger, go the 8-inch. If somebody's looking to save cost, but they want a balance of performance, 6-inch is a great option. If somebody cares most about just a discrete installation where the speaker is hidden in a garden bed, then absolutely I would say go with the 4-inch. You really can't go wrong either way, but as Brett said, as you go higher up in the line, you're going to get more output, more bass performance, and overall just a better experience. You can do 6 speakers, 3 each channel, as long as the ones they suggest. I think that's in response to Sonos. Is there any delay in long runs or speakers placed from the amp? Great question. There, short answer is no. Long answer, I would say, is if you're talking about the distance from the amp to the speaker, or I would say the set of speakers, the answer is no. But if you're talking about large runs and distances of speakers, then yes. Typically, for every 1 foot you travel, you get a delay of about a millisecond. That's just the speed of sound travel. And so what you will start to hear in really large systems is you'll start to hear kind of the echo effect of speakers that are far away. So I think the answer to this one, short answer is no, you don't get any signal delay through the wire for long wire runs. Yes, Paul, on the mono stereo question. Yeah, so I don't recommend trying to do a stereo system outdoors. Typically what you don't want to hear is like, the vocals coming from one side of the yard and the guitars coming from the other side of the yard. You're much better off getting a more consistent mono experience of all audio kind of hitting you at the same time. So, and that's pretty much from every conversation I've had in the industry, unanimous. Most people prefer mono systems outdoors.
Yep. These are all great questions. Thanks everyone for
Yeah, absolutely. Greg has a question, Brett, about next webinar. Are there any links ready
you
for
know
that?
what? How about this? While we're going through some questions, let me throw that up on the screen. These are our next two sessions. So, like I said, next week we'll be doing outdoor audio and lighting with Radiance. And then 2 weeks from now, we'll be doing something we're calling everything else under the sun. We're going to go and dive into SunBright as well as auto control of outdoor systems.
Yep. And then question from Scott here. Will episode amps ever have EQ settings in the future based on which speakers you set up?
They
So,
already have them, don't they?
yep. Yeah. So we have uh, 3 banks of presets, A, B, and C, because the quantity of permutations of speakers and subwoofers that we have outmasses what the capability for storing the presets in the amplifier are. So anyways, yes, we do have presets for the majority of our landscape systems and outdoor systems built into our DSP amplifiers. That's also the case for our indoor multi-channel amplifiers from Episode. We have presets in our Episode response amplifiers, and then in our Triad line, we have presets in our Triad audio matrices as well. So yes, we do have lots of EQ preset settings available. You can scale low impedance using series parallel. It's just more difficult to calculate and control. You could do 8 times 4 speakers, and yes, that is true,
Yeah,
Michael. You can do that.
That's why I said you can trick it, right? Because you can run a set in series and then parallel them together and kind of cheat the whole math. It just is more complex.
Yeah, and you're also, yes, it's more complex, and you're also still splitting power between each of the speakers. So the more that you do that, you're essentially, there's going to be a crossover point where it's just easier and better to use the 70-volt, and you'll have the same performance output because you're not getting lower power per product or per speaker. I think this is, how can you achieve that deep bass without a subwoofer? Great question, Paul. There's a saying we like to use in audio development that is there's no replacement for displacement. And essentially what that means is uh, it's all about moving air. And so, you have to be able to displace air or move it. And oftentimes that comes in the form of bigger cone surfaces, and bigger cone surfaces is oftentimes in the form of subwoofer. So if I had to guess, the hotel that you're at in Las Vegas probably did have subwoofers hidden or buried somewhere. I don't know. I don't know what system they were using, but it's very likely that they had subwoofers in the system somewhere. If there was what you're describing as the level of bass output that it had. So, but yes, great comment there. Yeah, it's very, very, very possible and very doable to create great sounding experiences like that with systems like this.
Yeah, Mike's got a good question, and I think he's nailed it. These can be applied to commercial applications, not just outdoor, as well as I think sometimes people forget they're are a lot of commercial outdoor projects that need to get addressed as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question is the guys at the MRI counter recommend the episode terrain kit. Does that set require a single channel sending to the main speaker, and then the unit sends the output to the other speakers? So the terrain system is actually a little bit of a different design in that it's actually designed as a system. And so you actually wire similarly to like we're talking about with the landscape stuff, all in parallel, but the closed system of the parallel wiring and terrain creates a nominal impedance of anywhere between 4 and 8 ohms. And so terrain is actually intended to be used with a traditional 8 ohm amplifier. So whether that's a powered zone 2 out of an AVR, or if you're wanting to use a channel off of a multi-channel amplifier, or a Sonos amplifier, for example, or just a single 2-channel amplifier. The terrain system is intended so that you can do, it comes as a 4.1 kit. You can buy 2 speaker accessory pair add-ons to build up to, you can actually do up to an 8.2 and still stay under or over the 4 ohm impedance on a multi-channel or 8 ohm amplifier. So the benefits of that system are it's quite a bit more cost effective, a lot simpler because you can just use standard 8 ohm amplifiers instead of having to use special amplifier like this hybrid amplifier. The downsides are is that you're really restricted to the size and scale that you can make the system. And again, your performance is not going to be quite to the degree or the level that you're going to be able to achieve with a scaled outdoor landscape system, just because of one, the size and output and performance of the product, and then two, the limited scale that you can go with the 8.2.
Yeah, it's rated at 3,500 square feet, if I'm correct. So,
Yeah, 3,000 or 3,500, somewhere in there. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, you know what, Paul, that was awesome because that's a great segue to talk about. We do have a survey for you guys. Um, please go and scan the QR code. Let us know how we did, what else you want to learn from us. But ironically, um, after this whole series completes, we're going to do a drawing for a episode terrain series for 4-inch satellites and the 8-inch subwoofer. So we're going to actually give you guys one of those. Let's see. I think we're done with the questions. Awesome. Well, again, I appreciate all your guys' time as always. I know you're all busy. Matt, thank you very much for hanging out with us, answering some great questions, and we will see you all soon. Thank you.